Philadelphia Naval Shipyard, October 28, 1943. A cold autumn morning. The harbor is gray. The sky is gray. The destroyer escort, USS Eldridge, sits motionless at the dock, its hull dark against the water, its crew of nearly 200 men going about their duties, as they have every morning since the ship was commissioned 2 months earlier. But today is different. Today, several large generators have been mounted to the deck, equipment that wasn't there yesterday, equipment none of the enlisted men can explain. The rumor moving through the lower decks is that the Navy is about to test something classified, something that involves electromagnetic fields powerful enough to bend light itself. At precisely 0900 hours, the switches are thrown. The generators hum to life. A low building vibration moves through the hull, through the deck plates, through the bones of every man aboard. And then, according to witnesses on nearby vessels, a green, mist-like fog begins to form around the ship. It thickens, it swirls, it wraps itself around the Eldridge like a second skin. And then the ship vanishes, not sinks, not moves. Vanishes. From sight, from radar, from the physical space it occupied seconds earlier, in full daylight, in front of multiple witnesses. Moments later, more than 250 miles away in Norfolk, Virginia, the USS Eldridge flickers into existence. It is seen, it is reported, and then, just as suddenly, it flickers out again, reappearing back in Philadelphia, arriving 10 minutes before it ever left. What followed in the hours and days after that test is a story the Navy has denied for more than 80 years. A story of sailors fused into bulkheads, of men driven insane by forces they could not comprehend, of a scientific breakthrough that cost human lives, and was buried so completely that even today, the official position is that nothing ever happened. But what if that isn't the whole story? What if, on that October morning in 1943, the United States Navy didn't just attempt to make a warship invisible to enemy radar, but accidentally opened a door to something far stranger? What if the men aboard the Eldridge didn't just witness a failed experiment, but became the first human beings to experience controlled teleportation? What if the government's denial isn't a denial at all, but a careful, deliberate, decades-long effort to bury the most dangerous discovery of the 20th century? And what if the truth of what happened in Philadelphia isn't hidden in classified archives or buried on some forgotten naval base, but has been sitting in plain sight this entire time, scattered across declassified documents, shipping logs, and the rambling, desperate letters of a man who swore he saw it all? The Philadelphia experiment has been called the greatest conspiracy theory of World War II. It has spawned books, films, documentaries, and endless debates. It has been dismissed as hoax, elevated to legend, and everything in between. But somewhere between the green fog and the government denials, between the dead astronomer and the disappearing ship, there is a story that no one has told in full. Tonight, we're walking through every layer of this case: the ship, the sailors, the science that may, or may not, have been possible, the mysterious letters that started it all, the astronomer whose obsession may have cost him his life, and the declassified documents that reveal what the Navy was actually doing in Philadelphia while the world was convinced they were bending the fabric of space-time itself. To understand what may have happened aboard the Eldridge, we first need to understand the war that made such an experiment necessary. By the summer of 1943, the United States had been at war for less than 2 years, and the Atlantic Ocean had become a graveyard. German U-boats, operating in coordinated hunting packs known as wolf packs, were sinking Allied shipping at a rate that threatened to strangle the entire war effort. In the first 7 months of 1942 alone, German submarines destroyed more than 600 Allied vessels in the Atlantic. Tankers, cargo ships, troop transports, nothing was safe. The U-boats operated with such devastating efficiency that Allied naval commanders began to speak of the Battle of the Atlantic not as one engagement among many, but as the single campaign that would determine the outcome of the entire war. And it wasn't just the submarines. German naval mines deployed by the thousands along shipping routes and harbor approaches turned entire stretches of ocean into invisible death traps. These were not the crude contact mines of earlier wars. German engineers had developed magnetic influence mines, devices that sat on the seabed and detonated not when a ship struck them, but when a ship simply passed overhead. The metal hull of a vessel would trigger the mine's magnetic sensor. The explosion would break the ship's keel, and within minutes, thousands of tons of steel and hundreds of men would be on their way to the bottom. The Navy needed an answer, not just to the submarines, but to the mines. The solution they pursued was deceptively simple in concept. If magnetic mines were triggered by a ship's magnetic field, then the answer was to make ships invisible, not to the human eye, but to the magnetic sensors that German mines relied upon. Erase the magnetic signature and the mines become blind. The process was called Degaussing, named after Carl Friedrich Gauss, the mathematician who pioneered the study of magnetic fields. Ships were fitted with large coils of electrical cable. When energized, these coils generated a magnetic field of their own, one designed to cancel out the ship's natural magnetic signature. The result was a vessel that, from a magnetic perspective, effectively did not exist. But degaussing had limitations. The coils were expensive, the installation was complex, and the effect was temporary. A ship would slowly remagnetize as it traveled through the Earth's magnetic field and needed to be degaussed again on a regular schedule, like bringing a car in for maintenance. So the Navy began exploring alternatives. One of these was a process called deperming, running a massive electrical current through large cables wrapped around a ship's hull to scramble its magnetic domains more permanently. Another, more experimental approach involved the use of extremely powerful electromagnetic generators. The kind of generators that were rumored to have been installed on the deck of a newly commissioned destroyer escort in the fall of 1943, a ship called the USS Eldridge. The Eldridge was a cannon-class destroyer escort, a small fast warship designed to protect convoys from submarine attack. It was 206 feet long, carried a crew of 186 men, and had been commissioned on August 27, 1943 at the New York Navy Yard. By late October, it had been moved to Philadelphia for fitting and trials. According to naval records, the Eldridge was in Philadelphia for exactly one reason: to have degaussing equipment installed and calibrated. Nothing more, nothing less. But according to the story that would emerge 12 years later, the equipment aboard the Eldridge had nothing to do with magnetic mines, and everything to do with bending the fundamental laws of physics. The story of the Philadelphia experiment didn't begin with the Navy. It didn't begin with a leaked document, a whistleblower, or an investigative journalist. It began with a letter. In 1955, a man named Morris Ketchum Jessup received a strange piece of mail. Jessup was an astronomer by training. He held a master's degree from the University of Michigan and had spent years studying variable stars and binary systems. But his interests had recently taken a sharp turn toward the unconventional. Earlier that year, Jessup had published a book titled The Case for the UFO. It was a serious work, or as serious as a book about unidentified flying objects could be in 1955, arguing that extraterrestrial visitation deserved genuine scientific investigation rather than dismissal. The book sold modestly, but found a devoted audience among the growing community of UFO researchers and enthusiasts. One of those enthusiasts was a man writing under the name Carlos Miguel Allende. In a series of letters to Jessup, Allende made an extraordinary claim. He said that in October 1943, while serving aboard a merchant marine vessel called the SS Andrew Furuseth, he had witnessed something that defied explanation. His ship had been anchored near the Philadelphia Naval Shipyard when, in broad daylight, a Navy destroyer escort was enveloped in a green glowing fog, and then simply disappeared. Allende wrote that the ship had been the USS Eldridge, that the experiment had been called Project Rainbow, and that the technology involved had been based on Albert Einstein's unified field theory, an unfinished framework that attempted to merge electromagnetism and gravity into a single, coherent mathematical description of the universe. The effect, Allende claimed, was not merely invisibility to radar. The Eldridge had become optically invisible. It had vanished from the physical world. And when it reappeared, first in Norfolk, Virginia, then back in Philadelphia, something had gone catastrophically wrong. Allende described crew members found embedded in the ship's steel bulkheads, their bodies fused into the metal at the molecular level. Men walked through walls and were never seen again. Others burst into flames that burned for days. Those who survived the immediate effects were, in Allende's words, mad as hatters, their minds shattered by forces the human brain was never designed to process. It was a horrifying account. It was also, upon even casual examination, difficult to reconcile with reality. Allende's letters were rambling, disjointed, and filled with capitalizations and underlinings that made them read less like an eyewitness report and more like a document from a disturbed mind. When Jessup wrote back and asked for evidence, dates, names, any corroborating details, Allende responded with more pages of the same. No proof, no witnesses, just an increasingly elaborate and increasingly bizarre narrative. Jessup eventually stopped replying, and for a brief period, the Philadelphia experiment seemed destined to remain what it appeared to be, the product of one troubled man's imagination. But then the Navy got involved. Theory 2. In 1956, approximately 1 year after Jessup received Allende's first letter, 2 officers from the Office of Naval Research, the ONR, arrived at Jessup's office in Washington, D.C. They were carrying a package. Inside was a copy of Jessup's book, The Case for the UFO. This particular copy, however, was unlike any other edition in existence. Its margins were filled with handwritten annotations, dense scribbles in 3 different colors of ink, written, the officers explained, by 3 different individuals. The annotations discussed topics that had never appeared in Jessup's book: the Philadelphia experiment, the USS Eldridge, secret military technology, and claims that extraterrestrial beings had been involved in making the ship disappear. The Navy officers asked Jessup if he recognized the handwriting. He did. It was Carlos Allende, or rather, the man behind the pseudonym, whose real name was Carl Meredith Allen. Allen had used different colored pens to create the illusion of 3 separate annotators. He had also included letters supposedly written by one of these fictional contributors, a figure he identified only as Jemmy, who claimed to be an alien. The annotations were elaborate. They referenced the Philadelphia experiment by name. They described the technique of invisibility using temporal field displacement. They discussed Einstein's unified field theory in ways that sounded vaguely scientific, but collapsed into nonsense under scrutiny. And woven throughout was a persistent, unsettling theme: the idea that the Navy had not only conducted this experiment, but had continued to develop the technology in secret for more than a decade. What happened next is one of the most controversial elements of the entire Philadelphia experiment story. According to multiple accounts, the ONR, rather than dismissing Allen's annotations as the work of an unstable individual, took them seriously enough to investigate. The Navy, it is claimed, produced a limited print run of the annotated book. Some sources say 25 copies, others say 100, and these copies circulated within the Office of Naval Research for years, treated not as a curiosity, but as a document worth studying. If the Philadelphia experiment was a complete fabrication, conspiracy theorists have asked for decades, why did the Navy spend time and resources reproducing Allen's annotated book? Why did ONR officers personally visit Jessup? Why did any of this warrant official attention at all? The answer, when you examine the historical record, is both simpler and stranger than the conspiracy. First, the annotated book was real. The ONR did indeed reproduce a small number of copies, but not because they believed Allen's claims. The reproductions were produced at the request of a single ONR officer, a physicist named Commander George W. Hoover, who had a known personal interest in UFO research and fringe propulsion concepts. Hoover found Allen's annotations, not the Philadelphia experiment story specifically, but the broader discussion of theoretical propulsion methods, intellectually interesting enough to have them typed up and distributed to a handful of colleagues. It was a personal project, pursued during off hours and paid for out of Hoover's own pocket. Second, the ONR visit to Jessup was real, but the officers hadn't come because they were investigating the Philadelphia experiment. They had come because someone had mailed the annotated book to the Navy, anonymously, and they wanted to know if Jessup could identify who had done it. The visit was a courtesy to an author whose work had been appropriated without permission. The facts, as is so often the case, are less dramatic than the legend. But the legend was only beginning. Theory. 3. Morris Jessup's life unraveled in the years following the publication of The Case for the UFO. His second book sold poorly. His third was rejected by publishers. His wife left him. He was involved in a serious car accident that left him in chronic pain. And his correspondence with Carl Allen, far from opening new frontiers of scientific investigation, had become a source of professional embarrassment and personal torment. But Jessup had also become fascinated, perhaps dangerously so, by the Philadelphia experiment. He began collecting research, gathering documents, preparing what he told friends would be a definitive investigation of the Eldridge incident. On April 19, 1959, Jessup called his friend, Dr. Manson Valentine, and told him he had made a breakthrough. He wanted to meet the next day. He had news to share. The following afternoon, April 20, 1959, Morris Jessup was found dead in his car at Matheson Hammock Park in Miami-Dade County, Florida. A garden hose had been run from the exhaust pipe into the passenger compartment. Towels had been pressed into the windows to prevent any fumes from escaping. His death was ruled a suicide by carbon monoxide poisoning. No autopsy was performed. The circumstances of Jessup's death have fueled conspiracy theories for more than 60 years. He was silenced, believers claim, because he had come too close to the truth. The timing, a phone call announcing a breakthrough followed by sudden death, has never been fully explained. The absence of an autopsy has never been fully justified. But the evidence for murder, as opposed to suicide, is almost entirely circumstantial. Jessup had been severely depressed. His career had collapsed. He was in constant physical pain. He had spoken to friends about feeling trapped, hopeless, unable to see a way forward. The breakthrough he mentioned to Valentine may have been real, or it may have been a final act of optimism from a man who knew he was running out of time. What is certain is this: Jessup's death transformed the Philadelphia experiment from an obscure conspiracy theory into a legend. A scientist, a real one, with credentials, had investigated the story and died before he could reveal what he found. Whether his death was tragedy or conspiracy, it became an inseparable part of the mythology. And at the center of that mythology, throughout every twist and turn, was the man who had started it all, Carl Allen. Theory 4. Carl Meredith Allen was born in Pennsylvania in 1925. He served in the Merchant Marine during World War II, a fact that is verifiable through maritime records. He was indeed stationed at the Philadelphia Naval Shipyard at the time of the alleged experiment in October 1943. But here's the strange part. Allen didn't just write to Morris Jessup. Before the Philadelphia experiment letters, he had written to Jessup more than 50 times under various names and identities. Before that, he had submitted letters to science fiction magazines promoting various theories about space travel and alien contact. Before that, he had developed a reputation among fellow merchant mariners as a storyteller, a man who could spin a tale so vivid that even he seemed to half believe it. And after the Jessup letters made the Philadelphia experiment famous, Allen's behavior grew increasingly erratic. He wrote to the Navy. He wrote to Congress. He wrote to anyone who would listen. His claims expanded and contracted over time. Details changed between retellings. Dates shifted. The number of witnesses grew and shrank. He sometimes claimed to have been standing on the deck of the SS Andrew Furuseth when the Eldridge vanished. At other times, He suggested he had been aboard the Eldridge itself. In the 1960s, Allen gave interviews to UFO researchers in which he broke down in tears while describing the suffering of the Eldridge's crew. Men he had watched die, he said. In other interviews, he was calm, clinical, almost detached. The inconsistency did not go unnoticed. By the time Allen died in 1994, the Philadelphia experiment had long since outgrown him. It was no longer his story. It belonged to the culture, a dark, persistent legend of government overreach, scientific hubris, and the human cost of secrets kept too long. But while Carl Allen was writing his letters and Morris Jessup was building his research, something else was happening. Something that, for decades, remained hidden in plain sight. The USS Eldridge's official deck logs from October 1943 exist. They are public records, and they tell a very different story. On October 28, 1943, the date of the alleged experiment, the Eldridge was not in Philadelphia at all. According to its logs, the ship was in New York Harbor. It had been there for several days. It would remain there for several more. The Eldridge didn't arrive in Philadelphia until later that autumn, for degaussing, as the Navy had always maintained. The Eldridge's war diaries, also preserved in the National Archives, show the ship conducting routine patrols, anti-submarine training, and convoy escort duty throughout the period in question. There is no gap in the record, no missing day, no blacked-out section of the log that might conceal a secret operation, just a small warship doing what small warships do in wartime. The SS Andrew Furoseth, the merchant vessel on which Allen claimed to have been stationed when he witnessed the event, was also tracked through maritime records. Its position on October 28, 1943, placed it nowhere near the Philadelphia Naval Shipyard, and the Office of Naval Research, far from running a secret invisibility program, was not even created until 1946, 3 years after the alleged experiment took place. But here's the part that makes the Philadelphia experiment so enduring, the part that prevents it from being dismissed as pure fiction. The Navy really was conducting electromagnetic experiments in Philadelphia in 1943. The degaussing and deperming work was real. The generators were real. The classified research into countering German magnetic mines was real. And the idea of making a ship invisible to mines, to magnetic sensors, to enemy detection, was not science fiction. It was a practical military objective being pursued with real resources and real urgency. Carl Allen, as a merchant mariner stationed at the Philadelphia Naval Shipyard, would have seen some of this work. He would have heard the rumors that circulated among sailors. He would have noticed the unusual equipment being installed on ships. And if he was the kind of man who couldn't resist embellishing a story, and the evidence suggests very strongly that he was exactly that kind of man, then the Philadelphia experiment was not a lie pulled from thin air. It was a distortion of something real. Think about that. The Philadelphia experiment didn't emerge from nothing. It emerged from the gap between what was seen and what was understood. The same gap that has produced every great conspiracy theory in history. The degaussing coils, the powerful generators, the strange greenish glow that sometimes accompanied high-voltage electrical equipment in humid maritime air. These were all real. Allen didn't invent the elements, he rearranged them. Suddenly, the Philadelphia experiment wasn't a hoax. It was a magnification, a real secret, stretched beyond recognition by a man who couldn't help himself. So after everything, the letters, the astronomers, the ship logs, the naval research, what really happened in Philadelphia in 1943? The most likely answer is this. The Navy was conducting degaussing experiments that were both real and classified, but were designed to counter German mines, not to achieve invisibility or teleportation. Carl Allen, a merchant mariner with a vivid imagination and a documented pattern of fabulism, witnessed or heard about aspects of this work and transform them into the extraordinary narrative that became the Philadelphia experiment. Morris Jessup, a scientist whose career was already in decline, became entangled with Allen's story and was consumed by it, possibly to the point of obsession, possibly to the point of self-destruction. And the Navy's limited but real interaction with the case, reproducing the annotated book, questioning Jessup, provided just enough material to fuel decades of speculation. The ship's logs placed the Eldridge in New York, not Philadelphia, on the day of the alleged experiment. Merchant marine records place Allen elsewhere. Einstein's unified field theory was never completed, not by Einstein and certainly not by the Navy in 1943, and the technology required to bend space-time to teleport a 2,000-ton warship 250 miles and backward through time was not just unavailable in 1943, it remains unavailable today. But there's a caveat. The Navy's degaussing and deperming programs were among the most closely guarded secrets of World War II. They saved thousands of lives and millions of tons of shipping. They were developed in secrecy, deployed in secrecy, and remained classified for years after the war ended. And the boundary between making ships invisible to magnetic minds and making ships invisible is, in the popular imagination, a very thin one. The Philadelphia experiment endures not because it is true, but because it is built on a foundation of truth. The real secret was degaussing. The imagined secret was teleportation. And somewhere between those two poles, a legend was born. The Philadelphia experiment tells us something about the world we live in, or more precisely, about the world we want to live in. It is not enough for the government to have secrets. We need those secrets to be extraordinary. We need them to be dangerous, world-changing, hidden from the public for reasons that are both sinister and magnificent. A classified program to degauss warships is practical, important, and utterly forgettable. A classified program that accidentally tears a hole in space-time and fuses sailors into bulkheads is a story you carry with you for the rest of your life. And so we choose the latter. Not consciously, perhaps, but consistently. Again and again, across decades and generations, we reach for the version of events that means something, that carries weight, that transforms a gray morning in a Philadelphia shipyard into the opening scene of a mystery that has no ending. Carl Allen understood this. He understood it better than the Navy, better than Morris Jessup, better than the generations of researchers who have tried to prove or disprove his claims. He understood that a good story doesn't need to be true. It only needs to feel true. It only needs to fill a space that facts alone cannot. The real Degaussing experiments of 1943 were a triumph of applied physics, a clever, life-saving application of 19th century electromagnetic theory to a 20th century problem. But they were not a story. They were not something you tell your grandchildren. They were not something that makes the hair stand up on the back of your neck. The Philadelphia experiment, by contrast, is all of those things. It is a story about human ambition exceeding human understanding, about the price of secrets, about what happens when men with power try to bend the laws of nature to their will. It may not have happened the way Carl Allen described. But the fact that we are still talking about it, still debating it, still investigating it, still feeling that chill when we imagine a green fog swallowing a warship on an October morning, that in itself is real. That is the story's true power, and that power will not fade. Because the Philadelphia experiment, at its core, is not really about a ship. It's about our refusal to accept that the world is smaller than our imagination insists it must be. Somewhere between the deck logs and the letters, between the magnetic coils and the green fog, there is a version of 1943 that we will never fully recover. The documents have been filed, the witnesses have passed. The generators that hummed to life on that cold autumn morning have long since been scrapped. But the question remains. And as long as it does, the USS Eldridge has never quite returned to port.